Hey guys, welcome to my YouTube video. Today we're going to be doing a tutorial on how to turn your Raspberry Pi into a web server. I also wanted to bring up that you might have the question of what type of Raspberry Pi you need for this. Well, I've been using a Raspberry Pi for any Raspberry Pi will work with this, but I would highly recommend Raspberry Pi 4 for its cost, which you're gonna want 8 gigabytes of RAM. You could probably get away with 4 gigabytes, but I mean, we're talking about 75 bucks. RaspberryPi.org, $75 for your own computer, for your own server. Totally worth it. Just get a Pi 4, and it can handle 2 monitors at, I believe it's 60 frames per second, which is pretty fast, pretty good. 2 HD ports. The only thing I don't like about this is the HD ports are those little mini ones, which I've never had to use before, but you're kind of forced to use this HD port. And then you have a USB-C for power. Oh, that's pretty cool. Raspberry Pi 400, I've never heard of this, but that's pretty sick. You only have to get a keyboard, and the Pi is inside, and your externals like your monitor plugs in. Looks like back here. That is sick. That is totally sick. That's disgusting. The only thing that kind of sucks about this is you're limited to 4 gigabytes of RAM, which is alright. It's not horrible. 4 gigabytes is still good, but man, just pay a little bit more and get your 8 gigabytes. It's totally worth it. If you're not familiar with RAM, it stands for Random Access Memory. And it's basically how it can use your ROM, which is your read-only memory. And whenever you, for example, if you visit a website and you want to go back there another time, so you leave the website, you go back, well, you're using some RAM, and cache is what that RAM uses. To open up the website again, RAM is just how quickly it can retrieve that information and pull it up. So I use website as a really simple example, but that's anything really. But it doesn't necessarily have to be something you've used in the past. It's quick memory. If I open up a program, you're going to use RAM for it to try. It's how quickly it can receive that ROM, the memory. So 4 gigabytes to 8 gigabytes, trust me, is a big difference. I have 16 gigabytes in this computer right now, and it is lightning fast, way fast. The fact that it has Ethernet is very important, especially if you're running a web server online. And then one of the cool things about a Raspberry Pi 4, of course, that you can make the storage as big as you want to, because you have a memory card that you're gonna put in on. There's a slot there for the memory card. And so I bought a 64 gigabyte memory card before and was just running my server with that, and that was fine. So I didn't have to pay 60 bucks a month for that. I was running my own server, and what it costs to power this is just so small. You need a 2.5 amp power supply. So it's not a lot of power. It's just all around cheap, cost-efficient way to do things. Just a little bit of background on why I have learned a lot about this and am so interested in this is I have wanted to create a math tutoring website and have been working on that for a while. But I was paying this company 60 bucks a month to run my server, and the specs that the server had that I was paying this company for were about the same specs as the Raspberry Pi. Also, when I had a hosting provider, I was using WordPress for a while, and WordPress is really awesome for blogs and things where you don't need to do very specific things, but I needed to create a math tutoring website with dynamic tutor and student interface, a whiteboard, and chat. And you just can't do that with WordPress. One of the things I don't like about WordPress too is that it was harder for me, at least, and maybe somebody found a way that was easier, but all of my research I've done, it was hard for me to be able to get in depth in the code of things, the HTML, the CSS, the JavaScript. It feels like that was very layered and was hard for me to change things. It's almost like having an iPhone, you know, versus an Android, where an Android you can change a lot of things, just different needs. Anyways, WordPress is awesome, but this is one of the reasons why I wanted to create my own server and to just run my own code from that. It's very customizable, and it worked for what I was doing. I had a 64 gigabyte SD card, and it just spent yesterday, and so we're going to start afresh again. Thankfully, I had some of my website stuff backed up on GitHub, so I can just import that back on, but this tutorial is going to be from the start to finish on getting your Raspberry Pi 4 up and running, and then we'll get into installing the server, and we might get into some of the code, HTML, JavaScript, etc. If any of you guys are interested, just leave a comment for me so that I can know if you guys want that or something else. So anyways, let's go back to downloading our Raspberry Pi 4 OS. So you're going to want to go to raspberrypi.org/software. I'll have a link down in the description. Click download for Windows, and you're going to want to download this for Windows even though your Raspberry Pi is going to be on Linux. This is going to be the thing on your Windows that is going to transfer the Raspberry Pi OS. It's called Raspbian onto your SD card so that you can run it on your Raspberry Pi. And then obviously if you have a Mac, then download it for Mac as well. That's your starting place. And we're just going to open up our Imager executable, install, and we are going to run the Raspberry Pi Imager. Now you're going to want to make sure that you have your SD card inserted. I would really recommend getting a large, I got a 128 gigabyte SD card. I would recommend getting a large memory because it's totally worth it. It's basically, if you get a Windows computer that can handle 500 gigabytes, that's great, but there's SD cards that are higher. If you get a Windows computer that can handle 1 terabyte, just basic stock computer, it's a lot more, maybe like 300, $200 to $300 more just for 500 gigabytes more memory. Whereas if you just get an SD card, that's one of the cool things about the Raspberry Pi. You can always expand your storage, and it's cheap. You don't have to go break apart your system and install a new solid state disk drive or hard drive. So anyways, get that plugged in. Here it is, 119 gigabytes. It's 125. You always have some memory taken up by what it needs to get the SD card to function. You're always going to lose a little bit of memory. So anyways, here it is. Okay, we found it. Open up your Imager. Choose your SD card. There it is. Choose our OS. What do we want? I would recommend getting your Raspberry Pi OS, also known as Raspbian. This is called. You can get other ones. I haven't found a need to really mess with things here. You can do some kind of cool things if you want it to run as a game, like an NES player game platform. But I've done that before. It's called RetroPie. But here we're going to choose this one, Raspberry Pi OS, just the normal, and we're going to write it to our SD card. It's letting you know, hey, make sure there's no stuff on there. We'll say yep. And wait a while. It says, you have written it. You can now remove the SD card from the reader. Alrighty then. And I'm going to pull it up on my other computer.